System-driven noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly, get caught in the fray. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor blows the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Fun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow. Step into the light. Facts glow.
Hello, welcome to the Maurice Woodson. I'm sorry, I got your last name wrong on the thing. I did because you Maurice W.
Yeah.
So that's hang on, let me fix that. I feel like such an idiot. All right. Oh well.
That's all good.
All right. So here's the deal. I wrote an article about 5 years ago after the Tulsa massacre. And after I learned, if I'm being completely honest, about the Tulsa massacre, and because that night there was an episode of The Watchmen, and it was like the #1 most Googled thing, and I was one of the people that Googled, "Is it real?" And so I learned it's real. But then, rather than just say, "Wow, how come nobody knows about that?" I thought, "What else don't we know about?" And so I spent a couple of days researching and found, I don't know, 20 or 30 other instances where at least like 30 Black people were killed in these massacres. And all since the Civil War, by the way. I didn't go into like the pre-slavery things. And it was interesting. I found a lot of stuff interesting about it. Like almost all of the times they were described by white people as, being riots, which made me think of what was going on at the time with George Floyd, how MAGAs were trying to describe those as riots when they were protests. Because when Black people protest, white people see it as riots, I think. But when white people riot, that's a protest.
Right.
But anyway, so I just with there's been a lot of talk lately from MAGAs, and they're trying to take out, oh, we don't need to teach slavery anymore. Why do we need to tell white people they need to feel guilty? And like I've done research on my family tree, and there were people that came over here, and I don't know for sure they're slave owners, but I know they got land charters and came over here like before America existed. Like I have ancestors that were in Jamestown, or like the very first settlements in America. So I'm assuming that, some of them had slaves. And I know for a fact that I had ancestors from the Civil War that had slaves, because the census would include how many slaves they owned. So I have a couple that had like 4 or 5 slaves. And, and I'm not like proud of that, but I'm also not ashamed of that. I don't have anything to do with that. But it does make me aware that part of my heritage is people that owned other people. And, I think we need to like realize our history if we're going to understand our present. So anyway, I wrote this article. Maurice read it, and then Maurice actually spent not 2 days, but like 20 years studying this very topic and knows a lot more than I do. So I wanted to have Maurice on to come in and teach me things, and you guys are just invited in the conversation. So thanks a lot for coming on, Maurice. I genuinely appreciate this opportunity. Did I get anything wrong in our little intro there? Or what do you think?
First, I want to say I'm honored to be here, and I appreciated your article, and I appreciate the time you put into wanting to learn about something that most people don't want to learn or don't even want to talk about. So, yes, I think you got a lot of that right. Except, like I said, it's funny because I got the book I wrote, and again, I've been studying for over 25 years. Quick story. I discovered that I was related to Carter G. Woodson, who created Black History Month. That was the beginning of my journey because I wasn't really interested in Black history. Like most of us, we thought we knew. Growing up in school from kindergarten to high school, we were always taught about the same 7 people, and we thought those 7 people was it. That was our history. You know, Martin Luther King,
Wow.
Frederick Douglass, Rosa Parks. That was the story.
Hey,
We
by
didn't
the
know
way,
the story.
another reason I know that I probably have Black ancestors is I went to like on one of those family tree sites.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually distant cousins with Rosa Parks.
Are you really? That's
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, I truly believe that if you go back towards that period of time, anyone whose ancestors come from that period of time, we're all mixed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some of us in
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, that's a lot of ants. Like they have a lot of descendants there. So,
You know, I always say there's a lot of Black history. There's a lot of moments that happen that people don't realize they're connected to.
yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people. I know I have Irish in me. I also know I have German in me. Um, I know that there's a lot of white people who have Black in them. There's a lot of Black people who have white in them, and indigenous in them, because there's a whole lot of that going on.
Yeah.
And don't want to the fact that yes, some of it came from raping, some of it came from what happened to ownership of Black women, because throughout history, Black women has always been abused. Um, but it's a part of it. You know, there's no denying it at all. But back
Yeah.
to say about I also sort of watched, man. I'm a big comic book fan, so I also watched it. And the thing that always popped in my mind was the fact that people Googled it, people looked it up, and it became this big thing as if it was a one-off. And
Hmm.
not including, like you said, you didn't want to go back in the article to enslavement times. If you dodge out lynchings, if you dodge out anything that happened prior to emancipation, really, you know, there's still 200 plus massacres, not lynchings, not 1 or 2 people getting killed, but mass casualty massacres. Most of them are labeled as race riots, but we know what race riots really are. Race riots are a term used to justify those attacks, those
Yeah.
massacres.
And
So,
and
hey,
they're doing the same thing with George Floyd.
yeah, it's been through history. It's never changed. You go down to the earliest of the 1800s. I mean, and obviously you can go back further to present day. It's still the same thing. Anytime there's anything, a protest, a mob comes and kills a whole town, murders a whole town, burns down their homes, shoots people, stabs people, and worse. Um, Flooding towns, all that stuff happens, and they call it a race riot
Yeah.
because they don't want to call it a massacre. They don't want to call it what it is because
Yeah.
it tells you exactly who they are and what they are.
And I'm not sure if I remember which one it was right, but I think it was the Thibodeau massacre, where what happened is Black people had the audacity to teach their children how to read, and they had a school. And I mean, it's not like these are violent activities.
When you go down the line of all these massacres,
Alphabet riot or something,
I'm just like I said, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
But when you go down this, they're usually they were trying to vote. They were looking to build their own communities.
Yeah.
They were trying to teach people to read. You know, they were avoiding anything to do with the outside world, with outside their Black communities. And again, like I was saying earlier to you before we came on, is the one thing that is similar to almost 90% of the cases is a rumor that a Black man assaulted a white woman, either raped her, assaulted her, argued, murdered. And 99% of the time, it was all a lie.
Mhm.
Many times it's just made up completely, just made up to give a reason to attack these Black people because they're there and you don't like them there.
What is that called? Like it's the black thug trope or something. There's like a specific trope dedicated to scary black men
That's
violating.
a totally different thing. That's a whole another conversation, a whole nother thing, to make people afraid of black people. Black people are always angry. Black people are always vicious. Black people are always wanting to hurt somebody. The white woman attacked by a black man trope is the motivation behind multiple massacres.
And it's like you see the homeless guy that killed the Ukrainian girl,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that so many MAGAs fixated on that. You know, why aren't you fighting for Ukraine now or something like? And it's like, what are you trying to suggest here, that all black people are murderers? Or
But that's what they do.
no?
I mean, black on black crime, the whole terminology of that was to demonize black people and make black people seem like they're going out and killing black people. Black on white crime, they make it into a big thing. The media has always covered stories where someone happens and they track down the whole life story of the black person. They talk to his parents, they go back further, and they label him under certain terminology to make it sound like he's a criminal no matter what. A white person does the same crime and they don't even talk about it. There are more white crimes in this country and has been in this country, period. There's always been more white on black crimes, white on Latino crimes, white on LGBT crimes, goes down the list. But people don't talk about that because they want to make and demonize black people.
So
and brown
like,
people.
if I've said before, if January 6th were black people, we'd still be washing the blood out of the floors. Like,
Absolutely.
I don't think they would have all gotten a pardon.
Please. They would have, if the ones that didn't end up dead that day, 15 minutes after it started, would have been in jail for 60 years or life. That's just the way it is. But these guys got pardons, and what, 90% of them now work for ICE.
Yeah.
We know that's a fact. But it's always been the same story. Demonize, hide, erase history, hide, erase or whitewash accomplishments, contributions, to make it seem so they can say black people never contributed anything. Black people never do anything. They're lazy. They're not smart. And when I talk about ingenuity and black ingenuity, which is also important, and I just finished a book about that as well. You can't look around and not see black ingenuity. This computer that we're talking on and the system, black ingenuity is all part of why this even exists. It's your cell phones, your smartphones, all part of it. You step outside and you got the post office, the mailbox, street cleaners, traffic lights, garbage cans, rakes, mowing machine, all that stuff. Black ingenuity. You step inside your house, you got your doorknobs, you got your peep holes, you got your stoves, you got your refrigeration, you got your heating system, your air conditioning system, your flushing toilets, your mops, your brooms. You go down the line, all these inventions came from black people who made these things and never got credit for it.
And in addition to that, like, there's always people that are like, oh, I don't fly the Confederate flag because I believe in slavery, something. I just think it represents our Southern culture. And I'm just like, I think about it. Southern culture, what aspect of Southern culture does not owe itself to black culture? What is not actual appropriation? Is it your music? Because rock and roll exists because of black people.
Yep.
Is it your food? Yeah, what you call Southern food is also called soul food. Like fried chicken and all of that stuff, then the okra and like that's the red beans and rice or whatever, like all the really, really good Southern food was like developed by slaves because they got the worst food that there was and they managed to make something tasty out of it,
And I think that's
like you're like a lot of our, not all of them, but a lot of our hymns and the hymnals in the Christian churches came from slaves that were singing those songs.
But what people also need to think about is the fact that white people didn't care about the ease of existence of black people during enslavement. Black people did. So
Mhm.
they started inventing things
Mhm.
like the cotton gin and the rake and the plow and things to help them, the mop, the broom, all those things to help them in servitude, to help them in the
Mm,
field, to help them in the homes. The problem is they couldn't patent anything. Patents
mm,
weren't allowed for black people, you know.
right.
And so what a lot of people would do, the slave owners, the enslavers, would actually patent it in their name and enrich themselves. Most times not giving anything to those who created things. You
So
know,
Eli Whitney didn't invent the cotton gin?
yes, like why would he? He didn't have to work on it. He didn't do anything for it. Of course he did not. You know, that's all part of this process of stealing and enriching yourself off the backs and the sweat and ingenuity of black people. That's a fact. That's not something that, you know, I know people say it because that's not true. People always say black people invented everything and it's all a lie. Well, no, we didn't invent everything. We invented
Yeah.
a lot more than anybody knows. And what wasn't invented, we innovated.
Hmm.
You know, when they brought Africans over here, they just didn't bring laborers. They brought scientists, mathematicians, doctors, herbalists, spiritual advisors, you know, doctors and
So it
scientists and
wasn't
so
just
forth.
a bunch of people that were running around living in nomadic lives, chucking spears at lions or whatever.
Of
There
course
were
not.
like there
Of
were
course not.
and you know,
Most Europeans that came to Africa in the tens and 11s and 1200s and before that were learning. You know, you go back as far as history, and they were learning from what they were doing. They were learning their mathematicians, their math. They were learning their sciences. They were learning how to make medicines from them. You know, and of course they would take that, utilize it, and make a fortune for themselves. That's just the way it is.
yeah, there's I can't remember. I read a book when I was in college. Um, I can't remember the name of it, but it talked about like how black racism came about. Like, because before, like, if you read Othello, even, you
Yeah,
know, and
the
Othello was
Moors.
a positive character. No, and you read the Bible, and like the Queen of Ethiopia was like this like revered person, and there were very positive black characters, people in the Bible. There were very positive black people throughout European history up until the slave trade started. And it was like once the slave trade started, then they started in Western culture demonizing black people, diminishing black people, and race became more of a thing. And then you started getting the, like uh one drop rule and all of that kind of stuff. And so,
Racism. One of the things about racism is racism has always been a way to hide hate, jealousy,
mhm.
admiration. You know, and to keep the lie that one race is superior and above all. You know, they use that to hide it. They use it to, again, demonize black people so people don't know the truth. They don't want people to know the truth. You know, Africans were traveling to North America and South America in the
Mhm.
1200s and
Yeah,
trading with the indigenous
I did
people.
not know that. They,
Yeah, they were doing it way before anybody else came over here. People don't know. I wrote down a couple of things that I wanted to point out. Um, Estevancio Mustafa Uzumari, he was a Moor. He was the first black man to explore America, to go across America from one side to the other, this North American land, you know, and that was in 1604.
wow, wow.
1604, you know, the first man again to they started
And
again
when was Lewis
trading.
and Clark? Like,
Huh?
when did Lewis and Clark do that? Like
I can't remember,
17?
but even Lewis and Clark, when they did it, they weren't alone. There was a black man who saved them, fed them, carried them, communicated with the indigenous people.
Yeah.
For I can't remember his name. His one name. And I can't remember it for the life of me. But he was the one that negotiated. He was the one when
Oh,
they were
the Native American that did their
no,
translation.
black guy.
Oh, black guy.
He was a
Okay.
slave. He was Clark's slave,
Oh, wow.
and he came on it, and they treated him as an equal through most of the trip. But he was the one when they both got sick and almost died. He was the one that nursed them back to health. He was the one
Wow.
that made the medicine. He was the one that carried them distances. And when the indigenous people wanted to kill them, he was the one that negotiated with them and talked to them and helped them. And when they got back, he was promised that he would have his freedom. He kept him a slave for another 10 years.
Wow.
You know,
So it should be Lewis
the fact.
Clark and the guy whose name nobody knows what
Yeah.
is.
We know his name. I can't remember it right now. Should have wrote it down.
No, well, I mean, at least you
yeah.
know he exists. Most people
Right.
don't even know he exists. I didn't know he existed.
Like I said, because our stories aren't told. You know, again, how many people know in the 1800s that there were over 2,000, not 200, not 20, 2,000 black men elected to office in this country? You don't hear about any of them. You hear about who's the first one you think of. It's definitely not any of these guys. But this is like the 1800s. And again,
You're talking about after the Civil War?
after Civil War, yeah.
Yeah.
You
I know there
there's
was
the very first one was
impetus for a lot of these riots, right?
say
Because
again?
black people were winning, and that scared the crap out of a lot of racist white people.
Yeah, exactly what you're seeing right now after Obama winning, and then the creation of MAGA and the hate that's come from that started, during Reconstruction, 1800s, and it was the end of that. When they saw all these black people getting power, they got scared.
Mhm.
They changed the laws and made it so black people couldn't vote. You know, if your father or mother, well, really, because they didn't care about women, if your father wasn't able to vote, you can't vote. And of course, they couldn't vote because they were enslaved. You know, so they made it so black people couldn't vote, and then they forced all those politicians out of office, either by murdering them, threatening them, or abducting them, or forcing them to just leave. You know, it led to, like I said, the invention or the creation of the KKK. It led to the purge of black government, and then they made it so black people couldn't run for office for another 50 years. And this is their way of doing it.
They were also instituting a lot of loitering laws so that they could basically
That's the whole Jim Crow.
enslave black people, right?
Yeah, that was the whole Jim Crow thing. You couldn't, if they saw you walking down the street, not just standing and loitering, but if they saw you walking down the street and not working and not doing whatever, they would arrest you, they'd beat you, they'd jail you. Police brutality was crazy back then.
And they made it illegal to leave. Like you couldn't move.
You couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so when people tried to find and create their own communities, and this is what Tulsa was, what Rosewood was, there was so many of them, then they would come down and burn them down. They would come down and they'd flood them. Or you don't have any idea how many towns that were black communities thriving that are now underwater because people were driven out, people were murdered, people were massacred, and then they pulled out the dams and filled it up with water so that those communities are no longer there. People swim in those lakes, in those ponds, in those rivers, in those what used to be towns. It's a continuing process of always coming back full circle. Anytime they see black people getting some kind of power, be it on TV, be it the politics, they try to do something to remove them. Anytime people start, that's why books are being banned right now, because people are doing their own research. People are reading, and they're seeing that there's so much they don't know. And also all of the horrible, horrific atrocities that have been done. And the more people know that, the more they have to chop it down again, because you can't be a superior race if you have nothing to be superior about.
Yeah.
You can't be the moral high ground when you're doing the things and the horrific things that I'm not even going into because there's so much of it, that were being done just to keep a certain group of people in their place.
And so, like, I think, like they talk about, especially like the MAGAs, they talk about Confederate monuments or, names, bases named after Confederate generals. And it's like, I always think, well, you're just like, when you talk about that's our history, it's like, what does the word our mean? Like, are you talking about white history? Or are you talking about American history? Because the black person that has to go and serve at that base has to go and serve on a base that may have owned his ancestors. Like, named for somebody that owned his. Maybe he's not really happy, like, doesn't want to celebrate the history of his ancestors being enslaved. If you want to talk about our history, talk about our history. But don't sit there and talk about our history and ignore our history.
Well, I mean, the problem with that is that that's always been this country. I mean, our history has never been taught in schools. And what did our friendly neighborhood Homeland Security person say not too long ago when she's mentioned, white people? No, she mentioned black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, and regular people.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's the
I'm just
mentality. Yeah, that's
I'm
the
about as
mentality.
shocked as when this big fiery ball of fire, appeared in the sun this morning, or appeared in the sky this morning. That's the last time I was this shocked.
But it's so obvious that our history doesn't matter. When they talk about history, they want it to be white history, and even most of the white history you're taught is not true. It's propaganda. It's whitewashed to create white heroes.
Yeah.
They'll tell you that George Washington had wooden teeth. We know that his teeth were taken from enslaved people. They'll tell you that he never owned slaves. The dude was one of the worst slave owners in the history of this fucking country.
No, I've been to Mount Vernon. I graduated from Mount Vernon High School.
Okay.
Which is like less than a mile away from Mount Vernon. I've been to Mount Vernon.
I know it is.
I saw the slave quarters. He definitely owned a lot of slaves.
Oh, he did. He also lied and cheated to hold on to enslaved people who should have been free, because in Philadelphia there was a certain law that if you enslaved for a certain amount of time, you would automatically gain your freedom, and he would ship them back to his other home so that they wouldn't qualify, and then bring them back and start from scratch to make sure he maintained enslavement.
And like Thomas Jefferson literally conducted experiments to see how many generations of interbreeding it would take to, and this is his phrasing, to breed the blackout.
Yeah. God.
But and Jefferson are big, like the beacon of freedom and rights and all of that.
Yeah, but you'll never hear about
how
that.
hard it would be to breed the blackout. And he did those experiments using his slaves, and some of those slaves had children because they were women he raped. But he's
terrifying.
a big hero.
It's terrifying. You go down the line, Buffalo Bill, all these guys. There was no Betsy Ross making the flag. Paul Revere never even made his destination. He was one of many people who were going down. You go through history, there's so many, almost every president they say, owned enslaved people. They act like many of them didn't. Of course they did. Benjamin Franklin used to rent out a place to a guy who used to steal bodies from the grave sites and chop them up and things. There are so many stories that you never hear about, and then they tell you these heroic stories, and they're not even true. Even when you talk about Lewis and Clark, the story's not true. They tell you the story they want you to hear because they need to have these heroes be exactly who they need them to be, and they don't want to tell you that. So they don't want to tell you about that that Africans came here before Christopher Columbus, who also, every time they talk about Christopher Columbus, that's coming up, and they're talking about his monuments, to protect the monuments. This dude used to feed babies to dogs. He sexually trafficked women and children all over the world. He murdered and would hang
Who is
people and
that?
burn them alive. Christopher Columbus.
Oh yeah, he was a
He was a
he's
horrible person. And
terrible.
everybody that came in with him, they raped and killed more people than you could even imagine. But they want to put monuments up. They want to put monuments up for Confederates. They want to put monuments up to all the people who did the most horrific stuff, but because it was done to Black people, indigenous people, and non-white people, it's okay because
So
no
one
one
thing
else
I'm like
matters.
really getting from this conversation that is like causing me a paradigm shift is it's not just like the terrible things that white people did to Black people that isn't being taught. It's the achievements of Black people that aren't being taught.
The,
And so
yes,
like you had talked about the Black American stolen progress. The- it's like the accomplishments and advancements made by Black people need to also be taught so that it's not you have some asshole that sits there and sees a Black pilot and says, oh, I don't know if he really earned his job. Like
right.
like if you realize that there's all kinds of accomplishments of Black people that have nothing to do with music or sports
I'll tell
that
you, I just finished a book called Erased and Stolen Brilliance. How Black ingenuity was stolen. I don't know what the exact whole title is. So I'm still kind of playing with it. But at the end of the day, the whole book is about how inventions, how innovations, how medical breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs, mathematical breakthroughs, 1800s to present day, especially during the 1900s to the 70s, how it was hidden, how it was removed from history books, how it was never discussed. The math that took people to the moon. We're starting to learn that there was Black ingenuity behind that. A lot of Black women did the mathematics to make that possible. Again, like I said, all these inventions that made it so that people can live, people can communicate, people have light, people can cook inside. And they don't talk about that stuff because a lot of it was stolen. A lot of it, there's the point of, I like to use the term robber barons instead of just the businessmen, who used to steal inventions. Edison and Bell were known for stealing Black inventions, hiring Black people to draft their stuff and create their stuff and taking credit for it, or trying to pay them off a little bit of money to own what they had. And again, because a lot of people couldn't get the patents, couldn't get those controls, and were in desperate need of funds, they accepted things. And of course, they never got credit for it. And then a lot of other things were done and they're just not talked about. Because the minute you realize you can't say that Black people never contributed anything. You can't say that Black people are not as smart as white people, which is, going around, even in sports. For a long time, there was never a Black quarterback. Why? Because you say that Black men are not smart enough to calculate that until they became quarterbacks, and you see what happened.
Now, I remember, we were talking earlier, we were both born in 67. And so I remember Doug Williams and what a controversy. He was the first real Black quarterback, right?
Yeah.
And it
there
was
was such a controversy because they didn't want him.
Can a Black person, and then it was for like a while, it was, well, can a Black person be a throwing quarterback, right? Like, okay, they can run fast, and and so you had all these like dual threat quarterbacks, but can you have a pocket passer? And
as if we don't have thumbs.
Yeah.
Like, it's the silliest thing in the world.
But you don't have the brains to call audibles or something, I think is the idea, right? Like you're not smart enough to be. You have the athleticism, but you don't have. Now you got people like, Lamar Jackson, who's, maybe one of the best running quarterbacks and one of the best throwing quarterbacks of all time, and you've got Josh Allen, who's also the same thing, and we're not. Like, I think we've gotten past the point on some of these things that we're able to like not just look at race, but I wish we could do that in things outside of sports and outside of music. Like, why is it we can accept a black quarterback, but we can't accept a black pilot?
There was a time where people could accept it, and again, now we're back to full circle where people don't want to accept it because they're told not to. They're told that this DEI, these people are unqualified to have these positions. When people were getting them and find themselves in these positions, nobody said anything. I can tell you that in the 70s, nobody was complaining about the pilot being black. In the 80s, they get on the plane, the pilot's black. Nobody was complaining about the pilot being black. We all know that some of the best pilots in World War II were black.
Yeah,
this is a fact.
Remember when they tried to take the Tuskegee Airmen off the website?
Yeah, because you can't complain that black people can't be pilots when they exist, when those stories exist.
Yeah.
So you hide the stories. That's why they want to have, slaves being invited to America with their luggage and shaking hands with the captains of the ship to come down here in these children's books that they're trying to put out in Florida through, was it Praga, whatever these people are. They want to tell these stories that black people were better off and they came here for a better life instead of the truth. You can't change the stories if people know the stories. It's just like right now, you look at politics and you see where we are, and we understand the path they're taking right now. We understand the part of history that they're actually copying step by step by step. If people knew that, they would have saw this coming. They would have known what was happening with the creation of MAGA after Obama if they knew about Reconstruction, but they didn't.
So that you wanted to talk about the similarities and parallels between Reconstruction and Obama. And just one thing I want to mention by way of introducing this, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I've noticed a lot of times, like if you talk about Obama as the first black president, MAGAs will come in and they'll say he's mixed race. He's half white. And it's like they're trying to say, like, why do you feel the need to say he's half white when he's president? But if somebody is mixed race and they're in a clothing store and they're looking for a shirt, you don't care if Obama is half white. You care he's the color black, right? Like it just seems like they're trying to give Obama, the white half deserves the credit.
Well, here's to show how dumb that is. If somebody is part Russian and part Italian, does anybody sit there and say, well, he's not full Russian, he's not full Italian, he's not full white? No. They use that as a way, and again, you go back to the 1% laws. You're black if you have 1% in you.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you're not black enough if you have something. They did that with Kamala Harris. They did that with Obama. Yeah. Anytime somebody has something like that, they have to find something to knock away and chip away from it to disqualify it.
Because then black people didn't accomplish something.
Right.
It was just a white person who was, was half black, or an Indian person that was, even Trump was saying that Kamala's not black, right? Didn't they like say that?
Yeah, well, we don't go by much that he says because almost everything that he says is idiotic and racist.
Oh, but all the MAGAs were.
Of course, they jump on the same bandwagon because, again, you can't give credit to someone if you can find a way to diminish it. And diminishing has always been the history of trying to downplay anything that black people have done in this country. And I always get people, especially on social media, who love to say that black people contributed nothing, they've done nothing, they're lazy, we talked about before. And again, that's all because they don't know the truth. They don't know the history, don't know the contributions, they don't know the accomplishments, they don't know all the historic firsts that make life exactly what it is here today, all your comforts, because they don't want to teach that. Again, you can't say you're superior if you have nothing to be superior about. You have to feel like you're on top of somebody in order to feel that way. And the only way to do that,
you take away all of their accomplishments, all of the things that they've done, then you can say they haven't accomplished. And that is just to me, like, this is why we need to teach what they've done. Not like, I really appreciate your view. It's not just about all the evil crap white people have done to black people. It's
No,
all the things that black people have done that make white people's lives better now, and everybody's lives better now. Like,
you,
like, if you acknowledge all of the accomplishments of black people, then we could deal with racism that way.
I always say that our history is not just about oppression. They like to teach it as our thing, civil rights and slavery, enslavement, and fighting for that is our whole story, our whole narrative. And our story, that's like 2% of who and what we
Yeah,
are and what
right.
we've done in this country. You know, there's so many stories. I was telling you before the thing that I don't think that there's a black person, and most people don't know this, that when you go back to almost any historical moment that was achieved by a black person, whatever, you know, like I said, with me finding out who I was related to, and there's a whole lot more to that, you start to realize that there's so much that almost everybody has some connection to something, you know, be it a massacre, be it an invention, be it an invention, be it something. So you got online and somebody was there at that moment. Somebody's family member was part of that moment. You know, there's so much to it. And again, when you hide
I mean, like, black
stories,
people fought in the revolution, right?
of course,
Like we wouldn't have freedom
you would
if
have
there weren't black
won.
people. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it was won because of black people. I'm saying that it was necessary. Every war that's ever existed in this country, black people were part of. Every last one. They were needed, they were necessary, and they saved lives. Washington's life was saved 3 times by black people who, if they
Wow.
weren't there, he would have been dead. It would have never even made it to the history that we
That's
know
amazing.
today. You know, even when he was being poisoned. You know, there's so much of those stories that you don't really know about. You know, even the like the most lame story, not lame because you're kind of related to her, but you think of Rosa Parks' story. Rosa Parks was not the first person
Right, right.
to knock it up. There was actually 7 before her, and Thomas Jennings, who was the first black man to actually get a patent, not the first inventor, because we all know like a lot of that stuff was stolen. They couldn't get patents, but he was the first one. He invented the process for dry cleaning, which that's
Wow.
why George Jefferson had a dry cleaners. It was a nod
Oh,
to the first patent by a black person, which was the process for dry cleaning. You wouldn't have dry cleaning right now if it wasn't for black
so somebody
ingenuity.
knew their history on that one.
Oh yeah, that story's out there. But back to what I was saying. His daughter Elizabeth, she refused to get up and get off of an all-white streetcar, and um, the thing is, she was arrested. Her family, Thomas was a very wealthy businessman. He what was it? Chester Arthur, our 21st president. He hired Chester Arthur as his lawyer because he was a lawyer at the time. He was a young lawyer at the time, and they won that case. But this was way before Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and,
remember I just read about that recently. Like I just learned that recently. But
you know,
I'm curious, and so I actually do read. I think so like these are the kinds of things like people say, why do we need a Black History Month?
we don't need a Black History Month. We need a Black History Year. Again, my relative created Black History Month. It was Black History Week that turned to Black History Month. Carter G. Woodson is a relative of mine. And I was never a fan of Black History Month because what it tends to do is say, we're going to give you a month to throw you some crumbs. And again, like I said, when I was growing up, we learned about the same 7 to 10 people every year, over and over and over again. And kids today, same thing. They don't learn about these stories. They don't learn about any of the things that we're talking about today. They learn about the same people, the same safe, the same stories
Like I
that are
remember
out.
from Black History Month learning about how a black person invented the iron,
Mm-hmm.
like for ironing your clothes. And it's like, I'm thinking that's cool and everything, but it's like it kind of diminishes the actual accomplishments if you're just saying, oh well, they invented the iron. We
Well,
wouldn't have
it's kind of like George Washington Carver. They always teach that he invented peanut butter. The dude never invented peanut butter. He has nothing to do with peanut butter. He invented so many things that he made out of peanuts and soy and things that he grew, including rubber, oils, gasoline, oils, fuel. You know, there's all kind of medicines, all kind of stuff. The one thing he never did was create peanut butter. But because he worked with peanuts so much, someone said, "Oh, this dude made peanut butter," and they teach that. It's not true. You know, you learn about the iron, you learn about the ironing board. Also, again, all servitude things
Yeah.
were invented by Black people to make their lives easier and make it easier to do the work they did while in servitude. That's a fact. But
You
when you
might
mention that, there's
you,
still thousands and thousands and thousands more that no one mentions.
I read a biography of George Washington Carver when I was a kid, and it was pretty good. One thing I think is interesting is, you know, he had over 300 inventions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many?
Close to 500.
You talked about patents. How many Do you know how many patents he had?
None.
3.
Yeah,
He did have 3,
because I know he didn't think
but
it
he
was
was
necessary.
generally against patents because he
Yeah,
thought the things he invented should be available at everybody.
exactly. I didn't
Like
know
he
he had
was
the 3. I missed that. Yeah, because he didn't want to patent anything. He didn't think that anything should be patented. He didn't want to have ownership of it. He wanted to make it for the world, and that was who he was.
so like why isn't he considered as great or a greater person and inventor than Thomas Edison? Yeah, it might be a pigment thing.
And Thomas Edison again. Thomas Edison is known as a great inventor, and pretty much everything he's ever done was stolen. Not just
He
from
was
Black
more,
people, but from white inventors too. He
he was more of
stole
an
almost
Elon Musk.
everything.
He was more like Elon Musk than
He was
anything. You know,
worse than Elon Musk because
he
like I said,
just
not only does
supposedly
he
do stuff
have
and
people do
do
stuff
credit
and
for it.
take credit for it, he literally steal things. He literally sees something that someone was doing and try to get the information and then get people to draft it up and then try to beat them to the patent office before they got it out. You know, but Elon
So
Musk sucks too.
I really appreciate. I think this is a shift in the conversation that a lot of people, like you talk to so many, when you talk about teaching Black history, so many white people will think, why do I have to feel guilty? Why do you have to teach me that I need? Why would learning about George Washington Carver make you feel guilty? Why is it teaching that Black people helped Lewis and Clark make you feel guilty? Like if you just teach all the positive accomplishments of Black people and how Black people were standing side by side with white people throughout our history and helping us become the great country we are through their labor and through their brains, like why would that make you feel bad? Would it be because, you know, like in spite of all that they've accomplished, they've been, you know, oppressed at the same time? Like maybe, but that shouldn't make you feel guilty. That should make you scared of not bashing DEI or something. You know, it's like
Well, the whole
you know
bash of
the
DI is
history.
the same
Say,
thing.
look, we can be so much better than we are.
Imagine what this country could have been if so much time and money wasn't put into hate, suppression, and remaining superior. If, again, in the 1800s, you had all these politicians all fighting for and voted for because they were trying to do what was best for everyone. That's what Black people have never ran for office, have never tried to do anything back then that was just for Black people. It was always for the best of all. For women, you know, women wouldn't have the rights they have if it wasn't for the Black Civil Rights Movement. And a lot of the fights the Blacks had going all the way back to the 1800s and Reconstruction during that period of time. The thing is, they always want to hamper that. All the time that's spent hampering that, all that time that's spent removing and hiding and stuff, this country would have gone so far and would have created so much if everybody just elevated everybody, uplifted everybody, supported everybody, instead of trying, when someone has something, they try to find a way to block it. Somebody tries to comes with some kind of medication, they block that because it's taking money away from other billionaires, rich people, robber barons, you know. And it's always been about, this country's always been about making sure that a certain group of people stay on the top of the food chain and work. And in doing that, look at some countries around the world. They're doing amazing things with technology. They're doing amazing things with infrastructure. Infrastructure in this country hasn't changed in 70 years because they put no money into it. And even when they do, that money goes to all the wrong things anyway. You know, but they don't go. I mean, I always look back. I'm from the Bronx. You know, when you talk about Mount Vernon, but I'm from the Bronx. And today I can go. There's an overpass over the highway. They've been fixing it for 30 years, and it still looks like garbage.
You remember when that bridge in Minneapolis broke?
Mm-hmm.
My brother, well, both my brothers live in the Twin Cities. One of them had driven over that bridge, and he was like listening to the radio. And 5 minutes later, after he drives over the bridge, the announcement comes that the bridge had collapsed, and he was freaked out so bad. He was shaking so hard because he had just driven over that bridge, and
Wow.
was I mean, like if he had been 5 minutes later, he'd be dead. So he just pulled over and he just had to sit there and shake. And it's like, why is it in America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we can't even keep our bridges up? You know, it's like, but we can give Elon Musk tens of billions of dollars to go to Mars. You know, I mean, like, where are our
We
priorities?
can't fix our streets.
Yeah.
We can't fix our curbs. We can't fix our bridges. We can't fix buildings so chimneys don't fall on people. You know, we don't do anything and put any money into the things that need to be done to enhance anything. We don't take care of healthcare. We don't take care of feeding children and feeding the homeless. They do the minimum
And all of
that they
those
can
things
possibly
that
do on anything.
we prioritize disproportionately affect Black people. The current shutdown affects Black people more than white people.
Affects everybody. It affects everybody. But you know, when you the shutdown is a whole different thing. It's part of the whole plan. Shutting down allows them to do a lot of shady stuff um, without Congress being around, without anybody being around, in the shadows. A lot of stuff they're doing, the shady stuff in your face, and they're telling you they're doing it. You know, which I always kind of like laugh when people say, "Go, I can't believe that this," or "I don't believe I voted for that," when they told you, they showed you. They
Yeah.
dropped a 900-page document that told you what it was. It's not just against Black people. It's against poor people. It's against people in rural areas. It's against anyone who doesn't fit into their definition of whiteness and anyone who is not part of the 1%. Everybody else will be hurt, and they don't care. They don't want that. They want medieval times. They're working on medieval times, so they sit on the top having feasts, sitting on jewelry and jewels, and watching everybody else sit there and suffer and beg, and they throw them breadcrumbs, and they're happy, you know. And that's, again, that's been Black history throughout time in this country. Is they always throw crumbs to make you think you got something.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you watch the Jeffersons, you watch the TV shows. Most of the TV shows were, you need a show, let's give you Sanford and Son. Like, we want to see Black people living in a junkyard, you know. But at the time, we took it, we loved it, we accepted it. You know, all those shows, you know, until they started showing, getting out of the stereotypes and showing that, hey, you know what, there are great families. They tell you that most families are single moms. That's not true. Majority of Black families are mothers and fathers in the house. Majority of families where a father is in the house, they're more involved with their kids than any other person, white, Hispanic, Asian, period. That's a fact. That can be proven. But they don't want you to know that, because at the end of the day, when they do that, they can't say that, oh, you need a father in the house. Where's
You
the man
can't
in the
just
house?
say
That's why you're all messed up.
that Black people are poor because they have they don't have father influences or whatever.
They use that as why they don't have anything, and of course that they created systems to make it that if you're struggling, you can't get benefits if there's a man in the house. He has to be gone in order to do it. That's part of trying to force that narrative and continue that narrative. And still, those fathers are still more involved in their kids' lives. But you don't hear those stories because those aren't the stories they tell. They continue to demonize by using stereotypes, using terminology, using images. Like you were talking about the thug image. You know, that was posted all over the place, especially in the South, to make people afraid of Black people. And that doesn't change. Like I said, it went from those posters to the media. You know.
You wanted to talk about the similarities and parallels. You've talked about both Reconstruction and Obama. And you're saying there's parallels right now.
Well, when I talk about the parallels, it's like, you know, MAGA is nothing more than the white supremacist nationalist KKK that was created then. Why
so like you're like you're in agreement, like the only thing that's changed is the hat.
Yeah, it's definitely the only thing that's changed, the hat. And like I said, the motivation is exactly the same. Black power. To realize a Black man became president, the most powerful position in this country, freaked all of them out. Because that's right there opens the door. It's okay to have a couple of Congress seats. It's okay to have a couple of seats in Senate. It's okay to I mean, even they don't want you to be mayor. They don't want you to be governor, you know. But if you get that, they can deal with that. Now, but when you got president, that opens the door for more Black presidents. And also the fear has always been this, that Black people are going to do to white people what they did to us. And
there was a video where a Black woman said that.
It's a
and then she said something, and it's like, can't remember what she said, and she's like, and you better hope that never happens or something like that.
But the thing is, it's never happened.
Yeah.
It's never, ever, ever happened because Black people just want to exist. They just want to live and have equality and inclusion and be able to do what they do and enjoy it. They don't go attacking and try to bring down other people or take away from them. They don't go saying, hey, we need for us. They complain that Obama did more damage to separate this country. What did he do? He didn't fight for Black people. He fought for the country. And he did more outside the Black community than he ever did. Is why a lot of people in the Black community are like, yo, what do you do for us? You didn't come here for us. He's like, I'm the president of the country. I'm not the president of Black America. He never tried to do that, yet they still say he's the reason why there's all this division.
Well, you know, he
watch it every day.
He had the audacity to take a Black man at his word with the Harvard professor.
Yes.
And sat down with him and the cop. And so he legitimized that person's complaint. And I've still never heard a reason why his complaint wasn't legitimate. But because he believed the Black person, all the racist white people just lost their marbles.
Right. And again, going back to Reconstruction, it's the same thing. When Herman Rhodes and these politicians were elected, they were out there talking in front of white crowds, telling them, this is what I want to do for you. This is what I want to do for all of us. And they heard them. They heard these voices and they elected them. They heard what they were trying to do and they elected them. And again, a group of white, conservative, right-wing politicians, which back then were Democrats. People always said, well, Democrats created the KKK and all this stuff. But people don't seem to understand, or they don't really teach it, is that back then, most of the Black politicians were Republicans. That was the liberal party.
Right.
Republicans were the conservative party. But when they saw these Black men, because they were all men, because, you know, again, women didn't really count to them. And in the system that made it almost impossible for another 60 years for women to be involved in politics, even though one of the first women to run in politics was actually in the 1800s. But get back to the topic, was they saw these Black people appealing to not abolitionists, but just white people in general who wanted to live, who wanted to thrive, who wanted to exist in a country that was for them. And the only one speaking to them were these people. So they kept on electing them. And when they saw this, they got scared because they realized that all of a sudden they're losing power. They're losing control. It's no longer them. And the whole system was designed and then redesigned after Reconstruction to ensure that the same group of white people stayed on top and maintained power. And it's always been about the maintaining power and control of this country, and having black people in there messes that up.
Have you ever heard of a book called White Trash?
I've heard of it, yes.
So it's a really good book, and it's basically a history of how rich people have always exploited poor white people by saying that the black people are coming from you. And so
Right.
like making the poorer black people or the poorer Hispanic people the real threat to the poor and middle class white people, not the rich white people who are actually, like holding everybody down, right?
Right.
Like they're the ones fighting against unions. They're the ones fighting against, minimum wages and fighting against Social Security and things like that the middle class and poor white people need. It's like, if you don't side with us, then the black people are going to take your place, and then you're not going to know where to go. And
Right.
so, like when black people start saying things, and then white people that are middle class and poor white people say, "Hey, I recognize that struggle. I understand exactly where you're coming from. Maybe it's not your fault. Maybe we have more in common than I do with the rich white people." That can like really throw them like into some serious cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, that would make so much sense if they thought like that. That would make so much sense. It would change so many things if they realized that there's way more. Obama said all the time, there's way more similarities, differences. And it's always the person who's trying to suppress us and keep us down are the same group of people. You look at some of the poorest white communities and rural communities, and it's the same billionaires and millionaires who are controlling those towns and giving them nothing and making life difficult for them. That's always been system. And you're seeing it now with Trump in office. Man, since January, since February, really, you're seeing how hard they're going at making Hispanic people criminals and demons and eating and Haitians eating dogs and
like
cats and
black
people. Everyone's Antifa.
Terrorists.
Now it's always a demonized. They always demonize and weaponize words. They weaponize woke, which meant being awakened to the fact of what's going on, the racism and everything else. They demonize DEI, which they demonize CRT, and now anybody who's not MAGA is Antifa, which is an organization that's never existed. It's never, ever, ever. Anybody who's ever fought fascism is, I guess, under that term would be Antifa, but there's no organization. They just said they arrested the wife of the leader of Antifa. It's exhausting. Because
you know what
ridiculous.
I say? I know that Antifa, you know how you can prove Antifa is not an organization? Because you never get any emails asking for money from them.
Boom. You said that. I thought that was hilarious. And it's true. It's so true. Because if they were, they would be. Everybody else does. But there's no such thing. There's never.
You want to hear the story about when I met Obama?
Okay.
When I was at the University of Minnesota in 1994, he was speaking. He was a guest speaker, and it was like first black. He was just advertised as the first black editor of the Harvard Law Review, which was kind of a big deal back then. And so I went, and I was just mesmerized. I've met some pretty important people. I've met 2 presidents. I met Gerald Ford, and I met, other than Obama, I met Gerald Ford, and I met George W. Bush. And I've met Henry Kissinger. I've met, a few ambassadors. I met Edward Perkins, who was the first black ambassador to South Africa and the first black ambassador to the UN. Like, I've met some pretty important, powerful people. And this guy struck me as nobody had as much charisma or as much power as he did. And it wasn't it was just the way he spoke. It was his manner. He just had a presence that you were just like, this guy is something else. And so he gave, he was talking and everything, and I can't remember what the controversy was then, but there was somebody that wasn't getting prosecuted for something, like a Republican that wasn't getting prosecuted for something that was clearly should have been illegal, but it wasn't. And so he said, if anybody has any questions, come around afterwards and, I'll talk to you. And so I went and I shook hands with him and I said, like, how can this happen? And he said, okay, what you have to understand is this: the difference between what rich people do wrong and what poor people do wrong is that what poor people do wrong is a threat to rich people. But what rich people do wrong is a threat to poor people.
Right.
And what the rich people make the laws. So they don't make the things that they do wrong illegal.
Right. Which we're seeing a lot of right now.
And that is absolutely what's happening.
100% correct. It's always been that.
And obviously it made an impression on me because he was not president then, right? It was 1994. He was still 14 years away from being president. So I was like, so we talked for about 10 minutes. So I was late for a lunch with a friend of mine. And so I got there late and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm late. And he's like, what happened? I was like, I was at this thing. I think I just met the first black president of the United States. I said that in 1994. So cool story, at least I think.
See, you predicted it. You saw it. You saw it.
Anybody that would have known him would not have been. Anybody that had met him would not have been surprised. He is more impressive in person than he is on TV. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I wish I would have ever had the opportunity to speak with him. I never have. I've spoken to so many people in my lifetime through journalism and just being around a lot of people. I would have loved to.
I met in my life were when I was at a university. The other one was Maya Angelou. Don't ask me to choose.
Yeah, I met her. Yeah, another brilliant people. But again, today they say that they're inferior and they're dumb and they're not smart, and this is what we hear all the time. I mean, even like you look at Kamala Harris when she was running for president, and they talked about how incompetent she was when she was the most qualified person in the history of this country to ever run, and the only person to ever run who worked in every branch.
Yeah.
Yet she's incompetent, and
meanwhile,
she's
the orange
hire.
Greatest president.
Who doesn't even know anything. He doesn't know how anything works. He doesn't understand anything. But yeah,
did you hear today he asked who habeas corpus is?
Yes, I know. I saw that. Like I said,
who's that? They asked, "What do you think about suspending habeas corpus?" He's like, "Who's that?" Like, how dumb can you be?
Like I said, he doesn't know anything. He is the Pinocchio of the political world. He doesn't control anything. He doesn't run anything. He goes, plays golf. They tell him what to do. They tell him what executive orders to sign, and he does it. And every now and then, his ego jumps in to say ridiculous things that make no sense. And when people ask him questions, he doesn't have an answer because he doesn't know what they are. His famous answer to everything is, "Yes, we're looking at that, and we're going to do what we can about it," because he has no idea what it is. This is the dude that used a Sharpie to kind of draw a direction of tornado and hurricanes.
Right.
There's a guy who wanted to nuke tornadoes and drink bleach and people like, he never said. He did say that. He says a lot of dumb things that make absolutely no sense because he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything, but he has people around him that do, and unfortunately, what they do know is how to maintain that rich to poor balance, how to discriminate against Black, brown people, how to discriminate against LGBT people, and how to demonize things. And unfortunately, we have most of our political system and most of our media that jump on those bandwagons. Some of them are afraid because of the threats that they have on their own criminology. Things that they've done to enrich themselves that they know they can't say. Things they've done with different groups or organizations and people that they affiliate with, or you know, I guess things you consider crimes, that they don't want out there. Not to mention, you also have a bunch of people in there who are threatening to murder them, just like they did back in the 1800s and so forth, as long as they toe the line.
But all the violence is on the left, Maurice. Haven't
Of
you heard?
course, of course, no matter what, even if it shows otherwise. Guy could have Trump's face tattooed to his arm, his chest, his face, and all kind of signs, and they'll say it was the left that did it.
How come they
Because
always call black people Marxists?
it's another demonizing term. They call them all leftists. They call them Marxists. They call them all Antifa. Yeah, they call them all criminals. It's the same thing. It's going back to that poster of the mean mug black dude that they said, if you see a black man, go the other way. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. They did that since the 16th to 1700s, 1800s. It's always been
And
there.
they did it with the homeless guy that killed a Ukrainian woman.
Yeah, they do it with everybody.
They're just.
But if a white person did the same thing, they don't
Why
talk about
haven't
it.
you said anything about this? And it's like, well, I mean, why do I need to comment on that? Like,
Well,
yes,
it's
murder's bad, and this man killing this woman is bad. But why do I need to comment? Why does that murder matter more than any other murder?
because again, it's the same thing. A white man goes and mass murders a whole group of people, and he's just having a mental break right
Yes.
now. That's
Yes.
all it is. A black person kills somebody, he's an animal. He's this. Even if it's an accident, it doesn't matter. He's an animal. He's vicious. We need to stop this. Latino person, Hispanic person, anyone else is, they're demons. We got to get them out of the country. They're the most violent things. They have to be stopped. Those mass murders don't matter. Those mass shootings don't matter. Those serial killers don't matter. The violence that happens on a daily basis, at bars and those don't matter because they don't cover them the same. They don't demonize them. They don't even talk about them. I mean, when you're sitting around talking about Antifa which is an imaginary organization, is violent, yet you're watching Nazis walk the streets and not saying anything about them. You're watching the KKK walk the streets and do what they do and not say anything about them. You're watching white nationalists walk the streets and do domestic terrorist acts, and you're not saying anything. But the people who are protesting and sitting down singing are the violent ones.
Yeah. Right.
Also something that since we're talking about that, they always talk about and they always demonize peaceful protests when 90% of the looting, the cars being lit on fire, the bricks being thrown are by the police officers of those communities, are by organization agitators who go in to do that so they can do it. That's something that goes back to the 1700s. That's been done throughout history of time. You go in and you demonize the situation by doing these acts and then blame it on the protesters.
Even like the Boogaloo Boys, who one of their favorite things to show is the Minneapolis precinct burning down. 4 people were convicted of that, and they were all white Boogaloo Boys that were deliberately trying to cause violence so that people would blame black people. And then white racist people, and Fox News show that fire to demonize black people who just said, hey, we only want cops to stop legally being allowed to murder us.
Right. If you've ever seen the group of people, pretty much almost you go from the civil rights movement to the 2020 protests, and every time there's been anybody arrested for throwing bricks and violence, it's always been a group of white people. With 1 or 2 black people in the mix. And you can Google that. That's out there. You can go into FBI files and you'll see that most of the people that have been there. But there's a lot of videos, especially now, where you see these cops show up with bricks, layers of bricks and things in the trunk of their cars, and they do these things, mainly to create situations that they can yell and scream. Black people are violent. Black people are looting. Do black people loot? Yeah. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they feel they're owed something, they do it. But when they're protesting under certain most circumstances, no. Are they the ones that start a lot of that stuff? No. Sometimes they see the opportunity and they take it. I'm not gonna lie. They're not perfect. Black people aren't perfect.
There are black
There
people.
are black criminals out there too.
Actually, criminals. There
Yes.
are also white people who are
Right?
actually.
There are. But when you demonize everybody, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Nobody,
The difference is when a white person does it. People don't look at Dylan Roof and think all white people are racist murderers.
Yeah,
People look at what's his name, the Mormon guy that shot Charlie Kirk. Somehow everybody on the left gets blamed for him, even though he may not have been on the left. But everybody on the right never got blamed for Dylan Roof.
Right. I mean, it's
all he did was kill black people, so it's okay.
When you through history, you see that someone kills a black person, no one cares. They don't talk about it. It's not a big thing. Someone kills a white person, it's the news. A black person, a child goes missing, it's not news. A white child goes missing, it's talked about all over the country. Right. And we got to find this child. I can't believe this happened. If a black person was the one to abduct that child, his face is plastered 2 seconds after. If a white person, it takes forever before they even list them. And then it's always like, there's something wrong with this guy and so forth. It's always the same story. It doesn't change. It has never changed. And that's the thing that I think when people start to understand that most of the time in this country, it's been about demonizing groups so that other groups can feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
To feel superior. That's been the history of this country. You don't teach anything, you don't tell anything, but you want to demonize them in every way you possibly can.
Which I find ironic since they refer to themselves as the party of responsibility all the time. But they take me.
The least responsible, you go to the history of Republicans since the switch off, and every deficit that this country's ever had been by Republicans. Every atrocity that's ever been done in this country has been by conservative, right-wing, a lot of times Christian extremists.
They've even somehow managed to blame the Iraq war on the Democrats.
Of course, they blame everything on the Democrats. If
I'm pretty sure George W. Bush was the one that was responsible for that.
Yeah, if an alien ship came down to take over the earth, it would be the liberals and the leftists' fault that they're here.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Not Elon Musk's ship that went and antagonized some aliens, but it would just they would find a way to take the blame and say they did it.
They even try to blame Hitler on the liberals. He was a socialist.
He was a socialist. Of course he was. It's like I said, it's the same story. It doesn't change. Yeah. That's just it's how they maintain. You look at and now they're going around to these cities, these democratic cities, these leftist cities as they call them, these predominantly black cities, and they're saying they're war grounds, and there's nothing happening there. There's no problem. Crime is down in all of them, but they're yelling and screaming how bad it is and sending the military in because, again, it pushes the same narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always about pushing the same narrative.
And they always they never go to we're going to solve crime. They never go after the criminals.
No.
That's too scary. We can't go after the actual gangs. We're just going to go after, Pablo trying to pick strawberries in the field, or
but you look at drugs, for instance. Marijuana. They criminalized that, but they didn't criminalize cocaine. The people who were having cocaine and heroin and so forth until they hit black communities. Most of the drugs that went into black communities came from the FBI and came from the government anyway. They filtered that stuff in there. Most of the people selling illegal guns are these white gun shops and gun traders that bring them down and put them in there. A lot of times also government pushing these things in. And they criminalized this because the whole thing was designed. Nixon said it, Reagan said it. It was all to lock black people up, get them out so they can't vote, get them into jail so they can continue with free servitude because they love to make people in jail work for free doing labor jobs. It's just the dude labor. It's kind of why the prison system pretty much exists the way it exists today.
What is the? I got it. Let me look this up because uh, like I'll be honest, the first time like I started hearing about the prison thing, and how prison was just basically was a replacement for slavery. I was like, this seems like a bit of an overreach until I started learning why people were actually saying it. And it's so I just looked it up. A black man is 6 times as likely to go to prison as a white man,
Yes.
but is not 6 times more likely to commit a crime.
You know,
Especially when a lot of the crimes they're committing are things like marijuana possession, when white people and black people smoke marijuana about with the same frequency. And then you talk about things. And one of the things I think Biden should get some credit for is getting rid of this discrepancy between, you talked about cocaine, white people, and crack, black people. And like, I think it was a 20-to-1 difference in terms of prison time you would get for crack versus cocaine, even though it's the same drug, just different.
and almost just as many white people use crack as black people did, which is also another fact that you can look up. But yeah, it was always like criminalizing things that they could use against black people. And like I said, you get a black guy who is arrested for something, same crime as a white guy, and the white guy get a month in jail, and the black guy get 15 years, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
well, look at the white guy. The white guy that got raped, or he raped a woman behind the dumpster. It was like a swimmer, and he got like 7 months of probation.
That and tell the truth,
can you imagine if a black athlete had raped a white woman behind a dumpster? Would they sit there and go, well, he comes from a good family, so we don't want to ruin the rest of his life?
So I was going to say that too. So many judges have actually said that. White judges, they sit there and they're like, well, you're have a good life ahead of you. You have a good family, so we don't want to destroy that. So we're going to give you probation. We're going to give you 1 year, 2 years, and then again they give black people the longest term. I had a guy I knew who he was homeless. He was broke. I mean, I volunteered for homeless people a lot of years. Anyone who knows me knows I've done a lot of that over my life. But this guy couldn't afford a soda. He had 75 cents, and I think the soda was 95 cents. And he came in and he took the soda and he dropped the 75 cents and tried to get out the store. And they arrested him and he gave him 5 years.
Wow.
5 years for that. And then you see these guys who shoot somebody, rape somebody, and they get no time. You see a black guy and a white guy get the same crime and then get totally different sentences or get off.
George Floyd was murdered over a fake $20 bill that we don't even know if he knew was fake.
Right. But you see that all the time. You know how many black people are killed just because the traffic their headlight was out?
Yeah. The one guy in Minnesota was like literally killed because his headlight was out, and he said, I have a gun permit. Let me show you my gun.
You don't even have to have a gun.
And then now he's dead.
But you don't even have to have a gun. You don't have to have anything.
I'm talking about, where was the NRA? Where was the NRA? Can you imagine if a white guy was shot because he had a gun legally?
Hundreds of thousands of black people have been killed by the police for simply being stopped at the traffic light and being told, get out the car, and there's like, you have no right to tell me to do that. And then we get shot. How many times they say we saw a gun when they knew there was no gun? They said that they saw a weapon, they knew there was no weapon. They said they felt threatened where there was no threat. Somebody's down with their hands up and they're getting killed.
Threatened by your skin pigment.
And it's not even that they felt threatened. A lot of time they just felt hate. You got to understand that a lot of people who are affiliated with the law enforcement and have been since the 1800s have been affiliated with the white nationalist organizations. They got paraphernalia in their lockers. They have tattoos. They have everything that says, this is who I am. They go to those meetings.
What about when it's like black cops that do that?
Black cops are sometimes the worst because they want to fit in and then they want to keep their jobs. And they want to, there's a thing called where it's just a police mentality that you become part of that. You protect the blue. You do whatever. You know, there's a scene,
and so then it's
in
okay because they're one of the good ones. Like
they.
white people can accept black
I
people
hate
like
that
that.
term.
They're one of the good
But
ones.
that's the whole thing. They want to be part of that. They want to say they're part of that. And sometimes, like I said, they're harder on people who look like them because they don't want to seem like they're picking sides. They
Yeah,
want
right.
to seem that the only side they're picking is that. And then they're led to believe, and they're trained. Most police are trained and have been trained to automatically assume that a black person did something wrong anyway. If you see a black person walk the street, treat them like a criminal because most likely they did something. Maybe not today, maybe not yesterday, but somewhere they did. So there's a good chance they'll do it again. They're taught
So,
that.
so
I have a
people,
friend who's a cop, and when the first day he was blown away, he said they told him that.
so,
Always
so,
assume the black person is guilty.
so like there's this colloquialism that black people can't be racist, and I like to modify that by saying black people can't be racist against white people. Like if black people do and say exactly the same things as a racist white person would do and say, they're racist. They're just racist against their own race. But
I believe that everyone can
power
be
is
racist.
with
I
the
believe
white
that
people.
black people can be racist, white people be racist. If you hate someone just because of their race, you're racist. People who say that black people can't be racist, that's not true. The fact is that black people are defending their blackness. Black people are angry at the treatment of black people from white people. And a lot of times they have a reason to feel the hate that they feel. They have a reason to feel the frustration and anger, and they react to it. But if you're racist, if you're a person and you're racist against anybody of any other race, you're racist. If you're a person who is against anybody of any other gender, and you're a man, you're a misogynistic asshole. You know, it
You're
is what
making
it is.
Maurice. I don't think people know what to do with that.
It's like you can't sit there and say because of the treatment of black people throughout history that if you turn back and you hate somebody just because of their race and you say certain things and you use racial slurs or you attack people, that those aren't racist acts. They are. It makes no sense for them not to be. I understand why they try to justify it, but again, that's the problem with this country. People are always trying to justify things that they do instead of accepting what it is. I understand your pain. I understand your anger. I understand your frustration. And yeah, I'm tired of it. I don't want any of it anymore.
So
And
what about like people like Tim Scott or Clarence Thomas? Are they racist?
they're just
Like I like
too.
I don't
They're,
use
they're not they're not racist. Black people can't be
this
racist against
all,
black
like,
people. They can hate themselves. They can hate black people. They can want to fit in, but you can't, like I said, you can't be racist against your own people. That's against what the definition of the term is. But can you hate and have a certain of self-hate that you will look at another black person and hate them for being black? Every time you hear a black person say, I never want to date a black person because they're this, that's self-hate.
Okay.
That's it's not racism against those people. That makes no sense. But it is self-hate and hating for people who look like you. A white person who hates other white people, same thing. It's self-hate. You're hating whatever. It's okay to feel a certain way about what a group of people have done to another group of people.
What about the terms like Uncle Thomas? How do you like? What do you like? I don't like that term, and partly, I mean, a big part of it is like I don't feel like I'm qualified to say how black people should react to other black people because I have no idea. But
Well,
like when people call somebody, if they were to call Tim Scott and Uncle Tom, which I've seen on Twitter, like what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, it angers me whenever somebody uses the term Uncle Tom in a derogatory way. It just shows me that they don't know the history. They don't know the story of who that person was. The only reason that Uncle Tom is supposed to be this hateful person who hates black people is because a group of white people did a minstrel show making him into that. The guy who it was named after was a person who founded a town and took black people out and saved them from enslavement. He is
Wow.
a person who educated black people. He is a person who fought and helped to lead people down the railroad. This
What's
guy
his
was
name?
not. I'll send it to you. I gotta look it up because again,
Okay. This
I'm
is
old.
like I love.
I'm old, so I
This is
don't remember
awesome
names.
new information for me.
Yeah. But yeah, he's there was a book written, Uncle Tom, and it was written based on his story, and it's a story of heroism. It's a story of a man who did everything in his power. He was a slave. He escaped the slave. He taught people. He saved people. He built a town for people. He gave people a safe haven.
So he
But
wasn't the character. He wasn't the Samuel L.
no,
Jackson character in James.
no, he was not. But a group of theater people, which they did all the time, hated the fact of who this person was and the book in general, and they created this play called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and they got up there, did their minstrel acts, and painted him as this horrible person, painted him as a pedophile, painted him as somebody who black people couldn't trust. Um, and none of it was true. It was all comes from that show that stuck with people. It stuck with white people. It stuck with black people. People believe the truth is that this guy was a traitor to his race, and
Wow,
he was not at
that
all.
is amazing. This is why we need to learn real history,
Of course,
like in
the
school.
truth is so different than what you know and what you hear, and people hold on to things for life that they think is true that isn't.
I have a friend who is a neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic. He's like actually he was at the time he was the head of neurology at Cleveland Clinic. So, like he pretty much knew what he was talking about when it came to neurology, like one of the top neurologists in the world. And he was explaining how learning works to me. And when you're a child and up until about the time you're 30, every time you learn something, it forms a new neuron, like a literal biological connection that happens in your brain.
Right.
And the younger you are, the stronger that connection is. And so to later unlearn that and learn something new is actually, it requires like removing that neuron. It's like almost like a violent act in your brain to like
Right.
yank that thing out and replace it with something new.
Right. And
And
even
so
then, you got to be able to maintain it
changing
and
your
retain it.
mind is like really, really important. And so the just like learning new things or learning that you unlearn, like unlearning is harder than learning. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And that's why, like, they talk about why do we need to learn this stuff when they're so young? Why do they need to learn to be so naive? And or like why I'm sorry, not why do they why do they need to learn to hate their own race or whatever? It's like no, it's none of that. What we need to learn is actual reality.
Right.
And what they're trying to do is make it so that when they're in their 30s and they find out George Washington literally owned false teeth that were actually the real teeth of black people and not wooden teeth, right? Like he literally had people's teeth yanked out of their face to make himself dentures.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, 4 sets.
And then it's like, okay, when you learn that, it's like the cherry tree doesn't seem so impressive after that, right? Like
Yeah,
you need to learn he didn't chop down the, like he told the truth about chopping down the cherry tree.
No, he didn't tell the truth about that. The cherry tree never existed.
And he didn't
know
throw
that
a silver
story?
dollar
Oh
across
my
the
God.
Potomac and all that.
His
Like
father
that's
never
all
gave-
the stuff you have to
Yeah.
unlearn in order to learn what he really did.
Exactly, because his father never gave him an axe. He never chopped down a cherry tree. He never said, I can only tell the truth or whatever. None of that stuff is true. His publicist, while writing the book, created all that stuff to kind of make him seem noble. None of that stuff is true. Almost everything you've heard about George Washington is not true, other than the fact that he led the military at the time.
You
And
want
he
to know?
actually became
You want to know
president.
what's true about George Washington? He was the number one creditor of the United States during, like, after the Revolutionary War. He financed a good part of the Revolutionary War, and he agreed to forgive that debt in order to become the first president.
That is true. Now that is true.
So
one of the true stories of his story, you know, and like I said, so much of history isn't true. But would you believe that? Would you believe that Lincoln is the great emancipator, the great human lover of black people, never owned a slave? His family owned slaves, his friends owned slaves. He never had a problem with slaves. He never wanted to free
he was
black
also
people.
a big advocate for. Yeah, I lived in Liberia, by the way, for 2 years. But he was one of the big advocates for sending the slaves back.
Yeah,
Like,
he didn't want them here. He said, we need to do what we have to do to protect the country or whatever.
He might have been against slavery,
he
but
wanted to get everybody out. He said,
black
if we
ally.
do this, they have to go. We want them out of here. I don't want to live with them. I'm not equal. His exact words was, they are not equal to me. They are not equal to you. I want them to go back.
And at that time, that may have been a
but he couldn't do it. It made no sense to do it. First of all, it would have been too expensive. And again, everything comes down to money. Being able to ship all black people out of the country would have cost way too much money to do it. And the fact is, they realized after the wars and after all these situations that they needed them, and they needed that workforce, and they needed it. It made no sense to do it, and he dropped it.
And you know what? Like, so I lived in Liberia. I took Liberian history. I've read some books on. I met one of the foremost Liberian historians there is. You know the number one way that Liberians made money their first 70 years of existence?
How?
Indentured servitude. The freed American slaves went back and they sold their the local population in indentured servitude. Basically, the Panama Canal would not exist without the indentured servants sent from Liberia. And but and it's like, in a way, you kind of understand it, because that's the only economic system they knew as freed slaves.
True. Did you know that in this country that there were people held in slavery or indentured servitude, however you want to phrase it, until the 60s? That in Louisiana and Mississippi, there were people who never knew that enslavement ended.
Wow.
And they were living in the same kind of homes that they lived in during enslavement. They were getting up and doing the work all day and coming back, and they had no idea that enslavement ended until almost the 70s. To tell the truth.
Wow.
Until finally they were forced. It was found out.
So it wasn't Galveston where the last freed slaves found, or the last slaves found
out
about it.
No, not at all.
That's
yeah, we that would be nice, but I mean, it would be nice if none of that happened. But yeah.
And it's like, people also don't understand. Like, when in slavery, they started working at like 3, right? Like, it was they weren't like, you got to live 17 years and then you had to start your working life. It's like, you're 3, you got those little tiny hands. They're perfect for taking seeds out of cotton. And so they started working at 3.
And they were workers. They were farmers. When most of them, after getting their freedom, they worked farms. They raised and they sold vegetables. They sold things they grew. You always hear the story about black people and watermelon. Do you know why it's a thing about black people and watermelon? Watermelon was something that they grew in Africa, and black people during freedom started to grow watermelon here and sell it. And white people loved the watermelon. They were buying it up in droves, and black people were making fortunes. So white people said, we can't have this. So they started demonizing watermelons and saying, coming up what black people do to watermelons, and it's just a black person fruit and this and that, and started banning the purchasing of watermelons in certain communities in the South, until the point that it became a thing. But black people didn't even eat watermelon in this country, even though they were growing it. They were growing it to sell. But black people weren't this group of people who ate watermelon and loved watermelon. Most black people did not eat watermelon in this country.
Wow.
And they didn't understand it. because of being over here, enslaved all the time and away from it, like it
Uh-huh.
was in Africa. But they knew that it was making money. So that was something that they started selling.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, like it's funny. It's like, like the whole what's the Mrs. Butterworth,
Hmm.
and how like they just attached a blackface to it to make it sound more authentic.
So, you said it before, a lot of food um, comes from these enslaved families, and especially down south. And the food that was made while being enslaved for these families, they loved them. They bottled them. They sold them. White people, the barons, and enriched themselves off of that. And syrup is another one of them. Which is actually something they actually stole from the indigenous. But the way that black people use it on the pancakes and what they did with it, and making pancakes and making food and making chicken and making so many different kinds of food, they took it and they profited off of them. They
Yeah,
took it and they reclaimed it as their own.
and a lot of times it was just like the food that the white people didn't want to eat,
Right.
like the chitlins and and
even the fried fish.
Yeah.
Fried chicken, fried fish, all that stuff comes from that. The stuff that they would come bacon. Bacon was the part of the pig that nobody wanted to eat.
Yeah.
Until I realized, hey, this is some good stuff.
Same thing with barbecue ribs.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have barbecue, like when you start looking into Southern culture, what they call Southern culture, every aspect of it is derived from slavery.
Well, when you start looking at American culture, that's true. Not just food, but almost.
Oh yeah, right. Like you
almost
get
everything. But Southern is where most of the food, because that's where most of the enslavement took place.
But I always think of it in when they talk about the Confederate flag, and they're like, oh, we don't care about the slavery. We just celebrating our culture.
And again, like
what culture?
What culture?
Name one aspect of your culture that you're celebrating that flag is not an insult to.
Right. And the only part of your culture that exists to that was enslavement and torture and violence and massacres. That's it. There's nothing else there. So when you sit there and say you're proud of your culture and you're talking about Confederates, all you're talking about is atrocities.
Yeah. You're talking about atrocities and things black people like. If you want to talk about the food, you want to talk about the music, you want to talk about the good aspects of the culture, all of that was stuff you just stole from the slaves. And then the other aspects of your culture that you don't want to talk about were you oppressing the people you stole that stuff from.
Right. It's kind of like when you see commercials.
That flag wasn't even the flag. That flag was just something that you used to get Jim Crow laws passed, to get redlining laws passed, to fight against the Civil Rights Act. The Confederate flag was only ever used in conjunction with subjugating black people after the slaves were freed, after the Civil War was.
That right there is what they're celebrating. That right there is what they want to raise monuments to. That right there is what they talk about is their history, is their culture.
You know who was against who was against having statues raised to Confederate generals?
Who?
Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, of course.
He said, I don't want to. He said, I can't remember the quote, but said they wanted to build a statue to him for him, and he's like, don't do that. Like not like humbly or something like that.
No, he knew what he did, and he knew
I really don't deserve that.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to see it. So want people to remind the history of the evil deeds.
Yeah,
and having that there will be a forever reminder of the horrific things he did, and he can't die a peaceful death with that always being his face. That's what he made clear.
And
it doesn't make him a good guy at all.
Give him credit for that.
I'm not giving him credit for anything because he was evil. But
At
The
least
whole,
he knew he was evil, unlike Trump.
but it was personal. It
Yeah.
was selfish. He is not that he didn't want it there because he didn't think it was right to be there. He didn't want it there because he didn't want that to haunt him. And that's the difference.
So one last question. I have a hard cutoff at about 2 hours, like before 2 hours for like
You broke up.
logistics
I didn't hear what you
reasons.
said.
And I know, and I really want to. I always like to give my guests a chance for this, and especially you. You've started your own magazine. You've written your own books. Go ahead and tell us
Yeah.
about what you've done.
I've got to read it because, like I said, my memory is always good. Making sure all the titles, the subtitles sometimes can be kind of long, but but one of the
Oh, and
books
also,
that kind of really,
anything that you want, I can put in the descriptions on the YouTube link.
okay,
And
I
on my
can send you a
Substack
couple
link
things
so that
after
people
the
will know.
fact. But you know, because of what we're talking about here, I mean, I've written books across genres. You know, children's books that teach history, books that on depression, books on health, books on everything. But most of my books focus on Black history. I spend a lot of time on those books, and I have a series of books. There's 6 books now, called The Unwhitewashed Truth, which can be found on Amazon under The Unwhitewashed Truth or Maurice Woodson's books. But
And you
I
can
have.
get them, you said you can get those on Kindle for free.
Yeah, I made it so I want to make them as easy to read as possible. So I always make them so you can read them on Kindle for free. You don't always have to buy them. Of course, we like the support. It's always nice. But I want people to read them. And I make them so that they're easy to read. There's no real complicated words in it. And it's not complete, real thick books. They're designed for people to pick up, read, and get the information. And I want people to actually look further into it and deep dive even further. But I break down under that series, I have the erased and stolen brilliance, how Black inventions, innovations, and historic breakthroughs were stolen, co-opted, denied, or forgotten. I also have America's Unending War on Black Freedom, which actually goes into how Reconstruction and Obama and how they're similar. It tells that whole story in there and how it started the hatred towards Black people and the war against their freedoms. I have White Mobs, 200 plus massacres. That's actually the name of the book, because again, there was over 200 massacres, not lynchings, not to be confused with lynchings, massacres, multi-casualty massacres. I will make that clear that there are so many of these things, and people think there's only 1 or 2. Tulsa wasn't alone. And of course,
And that's what actually connect. That was the one that started our conversation.
yes,
So,
exactly. And I also have Abraham Lincoln, a false Black savior, which tells the story of how he really wasn't looking out for Black people and what the whole reason why emancipation happened. And again, I have a magazine, Black Zone magazine, which is unapologetically Black magazine that teaches Black history. It talks about Black culture. It talks about Black entertainment, Black life. I mean, you know, it goes into all different kind of topics. Talks about
and what was
depression.
the big feature on the current issue?
The current issue. Well, every issue has the untold history. I want to make sure that every issue does Black history. But the main feature of this issue was about creating Black businesses, creating Black brands, and creating generational Black wealth. That was the main theme of this issue. But again, like I said, we talk about updates and news. We talk about all the Black people found hanging over the last 2 years, which has been kind of crazy. We also talk about what Black TV shows are being removed and the racism behind that, and some Black shows that you want to watch. Anybody should watch. We talk about health. We talk about uh, dealing with your mental depression and stuff. We also have recipes. We also have different things. It's a full lifestyle magazine, but we make it so that we're giving you tidbits of politics. We're giving you tidbits of history. We're giving you each month these things that you can learn about what it is to be Black in America. And unfortunately, a lot of Black people need it too because they don't know.
Yeah. If we're all in the same classroom.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So one of the problems is that, again, we're never taught. And if we knew, this country would be a different country.
So like there's that show Blackish, which I really thought that was a great show. But they had a black dad that knew the history and would teach his kids that history. They weren't learning it in school. They were learning it from their black dad.
Right. And even he was teaching surface Black history because, again, most Black history is not known. Black teachers. First, I didn't have my first Black teacher until I was in high school. But even them, they don't know this stuff because they don't know this stuff either. And a lot of stuff wasn't available to learn. Again, if I didn't accidentally come across a lot of files from Carter G. Woodson's files,
You never had a Black teacher all through school.
Say it again. You never had one.
You never had a Black teacher. I didn't think of it until just now. And
yeah, I didn't have my first one until I was in high school. I was in 11th grade, and I got my first Black teacher. And I had another one in high school, and I had 3 in college.
Like I had some, maybe in college, yeah, but all the way through school, never had a Black teacher. I had a Filipino teacher. I had a couple of Hispanic teachers. Never had a Black teacher.
One of the reasons.
Kind of shocking now that I think about it.
It is. It should be. But it's normal.
There was a Black teacher that taught 6th grade when I was in 5th grade, but he left when I got to 6th grade. And we had a different teacher, a white guy.
Now, think of it for me. I lived in the Bronx in a predominantly Black community and did not have a Black teacher.
Wow.
And when I was in high school, I went to high school in Manhattan. I went to art and design in Manhattan. And that's where I had my first Black teacher. Not in the Black community. Not there. And though I've had some great teachers when I was in elementary school, some really cool teachers. But again, they didn't teach us Black history. They taught us Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, Rosa Parks. I always call it the 10 hits. They teach you the 10 hits. 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. Always the same one. The same posters on the wall that they pull out the cabinet. The same people they talk about. Occasionally, somebody would mention something different. Like you would mention somebody talk to you about the iron. But again, how many stories were there?
And that's why I say that, like that one neurologist that really made that, they're just building on that one neuron over and over again. So that when you get to be in your 30s and you're hearing about DEI and you're thinking about, like all this stuff, you like that neuron that tells you all this other stuff, you have to like violently rip that thing out in order to accept new information. That's why, like I had a learning psychologist on one time, and she was talking about, we always talk about cognitive dissonance, and like MAGAs are just actually cognitive dissonance. We understand that wrongly. Cognitive dissonance is not like like you can't accept new information because it opposes old information. Cognitive dissonance is there's a feeling of discomfort when new information conflicts with old information. And that discomfort is actually a positive thing.
There's also a thing where people accept things that they want to accept.
Yeah. And it's like, and that's like there's another word, I can't think of it, for like when that cognitive dissonance happens, and so you reject the new information.
Right.
Because it conflicts with your old information.
Right.
And it's like cognitive refusal or something like that. There's a different word for that. Cognitive dissonance is good because that discomfort can lead to you going, oh, this new information, I should accept that and reject the old information. The positive result of cognitive dissonance is learning. Right. And learning is positive.
Right. And I mean, again, that's why when I create these books, I create them so that you can read them. You can read them over again. You can read them over again, and they're not intimidating. Not these huge books that are intimidating. You look at them, you read them. Maurice Woodson books. If you just go there on Amazon, you'll find all those books are there in there anyway. But again, I do it with the magazine. I do it with that. And it's kind of like trying to chip away of all the false narratives, try to chip
Right.
away from all the
Right.
stereotypes, and hopefully, in the end, people will start to realize that they've been lied to. They'll start to realize that there's always been an agenda. And if you get past that agenda, you realize that there's a whole lot of great people on all sides. And if we all supported each other and all uplifted each other and all elevated each other, this country could be the Mecca it was supposed to be. But
Yeah.
so much time is spent on stopping that from happening, keeping the poor, keeping Black and brown people less than, and doing that. Again, we would be in a totally different place if things were different. And now we're in a place that's very dangerous because of the growing, I guess, the political power that they saw Black people having.
I'm hoping these are the dying the dying spasms of racism. Like, like this is just the last flailing about in the hopes of trying to keep something, and that eventually we get past it.
It would be nice, but the problem with that is that we are past that line right now. And like I said, I don't want to go into the whole politics, the whole situation, but I say it all the time, is that we're not heading towards disaster. We're in the disaster. We're in the storm already, and trying to find a way out of it is the problem. And if we can do that, then there's a chance we can get beyond it. But the one thing that has been proven is that there are tens and tens and tens and hundreds of millions of people who don't want things to change from what it is, who don't want to give up privilege, who don't want to accept equality and inclusion, and they maintain a superiority. And that's terrifying, because it's like, how do you defeat that when more than half the country wants it to stay?
Yeah. Well,
I would like to think it's not that way, but it is that way.
And, Germany ended up surviving. Maybe we'll end up surviving. I don't know.
I mean, eventually we will.
Worse before they get better. But I think that eventually, I believe in humanity enough that I think that we can eventually get past it. But
I do too. I just want it to be in my lifetime.
I would love that. I would love that, brother. I would love that so much. I would just love it if we could, like this idea that, oh, well, if we just don't pay attention to race, then racism will go away. And I always say, if you can't see race, how can you see racism?
Right.
And they want
to take 11, 12 years to get rid of Hitler?
Racism, it won't happen anymore. And no, it'll just be doubled down on. Anyway, I've got to go. I've got to end here because I've got I'll explain it to you off camera, but I can't go past 2 hours.
No, that's okay.
And we're right up against the fence. Did you have a website you wanted to pitch?
blackzonemagazine.com. If you go to blackzonemagazine.com, you can actually go to the Books We Love section and see a lot of the books. You can go to the magazine from there. There's a lot of information there, classic music, Black movies as well. But I'll send you some links to some things too when we get off. But
okay, yeah, and I can post those on the YouTube link. And Debbie just posted. Thank you, great conversation.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you.
So we'll end here. I really appreciate you coming on, and you've really helped me think of things in a new way. That it's not just about the bad things white people did to Black thing, but it's the good things Black people did that have helped white people. And that's got to be a big part of the history that we're not learning and we need to learn.
I like to say the good things that Black people created that just people need to know about, and that have benefited and contributed to this country.
Yeah,
not
to
just
this
white
country.
people, everybody, to this country in general.
Not just to white people, it benefited all people. Yes.
All right, man. It's a blessing. Thank you. A lot of respect for you. Keep on doing what you're doing because you're doing great work.
Thank you, brother. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.